everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name is Kat, and today, you guys, this is a first for me. I have definitely never done anything like this on my channel before, but when I got asked to do a collab, I was like, yes, I will do a collab, because I've never done one before, and I'm super duper excited. And so, I am doing a collab. I don't know if I made that clear. But the lovely Adalind from the YouTube channel Grundy asked me a few weeks ago if I wanted to do a collab with her, and I was like, yes I do. This is gonna be awesome. I love her content. So essentially what she does, she is a UK-based YouTube creator, and I will make sure that I link not only her channel down below, but also her Instagram handle if you guys want to check her out on Instagram. All the things, just everything's gonna be linked down below. But she's essentially out of the UK, and she does these series on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, where Fridays is Phantom Friday, and then Saturdays and Sundays are Spirit and Seance Saturdays and Sundays. And so she essentially does her makeup while she's talking about all these different haunted places, spooky stories. It is awesome. And when I tell you guys that her makeup skills are like supremely good, they are just like, I'm gonna look like a complete goober compared to her, but I'm gonna do my best. But make sure you guys go check her out. But in honor of her being from the UK, essentially what we decided to do was she picked a haunted place in the UK for me to talk about with you guys, and I picked a haunted place in Arizona for her to talk about. So if you guys are interested in seeing a haunted, scary video about Arizona, make sure you guys go check her channel out, because it's up at the same time as mine. Go check it out! Also, since she is from the UK, she recently ended up getting a full-time gig with Benefit, so kudos to her for that. It's really awesome. Super jealous. I decided that not only am I going to use some UK-based indie brands, I am also going to use just a ton of Benefit products, and everything that I'm going to be using in the video I'll link down in the description so that you guys know what products I was using, because I don't know if I'm just gonna like always remember to show what I am using, because I want to make sure that I'm giving all of the attention to the scary things. And so the makeup that is going to be going on my face, I will attempt to remember to talk about all of it, but it's not going to be the focus. The focus is going to be on the haunting. So let's just go ahead and jump right in. I'm so ready. Okay. Guys, I've got like 30 pages of notes. I went a little nuts to make sure that I had like absolutely everything so I could get this right. Here we go. I'm gonna start off with my face while we're doing this, so this might already be a risk, but I'm gonna be using Charlotte Tilbury for my primer, and it's the Magic Cream. So we'll see. All right, so the location that I got to have is Blickling Hall, and Blickling Hall is located in Norfolk, England, and it goes back many a century with its existence. And so we'll give a little bit of a brief history on the hall itself, some of the past owners and everything and their stories before we get into the hauntings, because those past owners, they're gonna come up again later. For the foundation, I'm gonna be using the Hello Happy Flawless Brightening Foundation from Benefit. I went ahead and grabbed the shade 3. Hopefully that will be accurate with my skin tone, because it is winter and I am a ghost. So it's very relevant and apropos for this video. So the first owner that I'm going to be talking about was Sir John Fastolf of Caister, I think is how you say that. And this was back in the 15th century that he owned Blickling Hall, and he ended up passing away in 1459, but he is an interesting dude because apparently it is rumored that William Shakespeare himself decided to base one of his characters for Henry IV on this dude, and so the character of Falstaff was based on this guy, and he ended up playing a companion to the future Henry V. So after he passed away, the next set of owners you may have heard of at the beginning of 1500, like 1499, 1500 time frame. They don't have the exact year really garnered out there. Tom Boleyn and his wife moved into said hall, and they birthed 3 children, really technically 5, but very sad, as what happened during those times is that not all children made it out of childhood, so they actually ended up losing 2 of their children very young. But the 3 primary children that they had were Mary, Anne, and George. And oh man, do they matter for later. It is said that Tom was very much a social climber that really cared about his reputation and his position in court. And this was during the time of Henry VIII, who just solid guy, that one. Womanizer, kind of crazy guy, just, you know, exactly what you want out of your king. So essentially, what happened was that Mary, the older of the two daughters, became his mistress. I guess as was done in those times. You would be married to someone and then have, you know, however many mistresses you felt like having. He was still married to his first wife at that time. He's had 6 wives total, but for the purpose of this story, we're going to focus on the first 3. His first wife was Catherine of Aragon. She could not bear him a son, and he was super duper peeved about this, you know, because why would he want daughters when he could have sons? And sensing his disappointment, Tom Boleyn felt that it would be apropos to send his daughters to court. And so Anne Boleyn, who I guess received her education in France and the Netherlands, was brought to court under the expectation from her father that she was going to seduce Henry. Her tactic was apparently brilliant because she essentially just decided that she was going to deny his advances. And that got him so riled up that he was just like, forget my first wife, I have a woman here that won't open her legs for me. That's what I need to get after. So she played super duper hard to get for him, and he was all about it. So he went ahead and tried to find a way to essentially annul his wedding with Catherine. However, since they had been married already for a hot minute, consummated the marriage, everything, the Pope was real not about that life. And Henry being who he was, and you know, he's not about to let the Pope tell him no, so he essentially started to push the process along to separate England from the Catholic Church. You know, that went real well. So essentially what he started doing was that he dissolved all kinds of convents and monasteries. He named himself the Supreme Head of Church of England, and that was kind of like the final straw. So he ended up getting excommunicated, and at that point he was like, sweet, now I can do whatever I want. And so at that point, he essentially renounced his marriage to Catherine, secretly married Anne, and then had the Archbishop of Canterbury approve that after the Archbishop had already stated that he approved the annulment of the marriage to Catherine. And so once that went through, then he acknowledged several days later the marriage between Anne and Henry, and then they were able to officially state that they were married, which, you know, hooray! I guess that's what they all wanted. Unfortunately, Anne was also not able to bear a son, and that got him real upset because she kept promising that she was gonna, you know, birth a son, but she did not. She ended up having a daughter instead, and then several miscarriages. And so he decided, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and start courting Jane Seymour. So as he's dating Jane Seymour, he's like, man, I gotta get rid of Anne. Can't have this wedding annulled as well. And so instead, he's like, we need to come up with a plan that states that she's like guilty of treason or some other crazy stuff so that we can just, you know, essentially get rid of her. So he and some of his like chief advisors come up with this plan to say that Anne was committing adultery with like 5 other dudes, and because she's also the queen, that's technically treason, I guess. One of those 5 dudes that she was shacking up with is George, her brother. And so they also ended up trying her and George for incest. If you've ever seen the movie The Other Boleyn Girl, they kind of address this a little bit more, where they make it seem like she actually wanted to do this. The historical documents that I was reading essentially were saying King Henry was the one that kind of fabricated this entire plot along with his advisors, and that at no point did Anne and George actually attempt to shack up with each other. You know, which I feel like, thank goodness. But they end up essentially holding trial to see if they can convict them, which obviously, you know, if the king is saying that they're doing this, they're gonna convict them. And fun fact, guess who was sitting on the trial for George? Their dad, Thomas. You know, just Real good dude, real great dad, dad of the year, gold star. He gave the guilty verdict for them, and that essentially sentenced both of them to death. So just real great guy, apparently, that Thomas. He's gonna come back up again later. He gets his comeuppance in the afterlife. So they end up beheading both George, along with the 4 other guys that ended up getting convicted of the adultery with Anne. So they ended up beheading George before they beheaded Anne. Actually, initially, they weren't even planning on beheading him. They were going to have him drawn and quartered and then kind of like dragged through the city, I guess. Which sounds great. But then they ended up deciding to behead him instead. So on the 17th of May, 1536, he was beheaded. And then 2 days later, on the 19th, Anne was beheaded. Mary managed to actually go unscathed to a certain degree and live out her life somewhat peacefully, I guess. And so that's at least good for her. You know, not many women that shack up with Henry VIII ended up off, you know, living their lives in somewhat of a good fashion. So props to her. But also, not so sadly, Tom ends up dying about 3 years later in 1539. So he didn't live a whole lot longer after that anyway, which I feel like is fair, you know, for what he did to his kids. I mean, he's the one that pushed them into going to court in the first place, so that's really just super great of him. All right, so after essentially the demise of the Boleyn family, the Blickling Hall property passed through quite a few other owners, including Sir Henry Hobart, who actually ended up having the current Blickling Hall as it looks now, with this lovely brick and it's all prettiness. Is actually built on the ruins of what used to be Blickling Hall back when the Boleyns lived there. I wasn't able to actually find out what happened to the property, like why they needed to build a whole new hall on top of some ruins, but they did, and so Sir Henry Hobart was the one that put that plan in the works and then had all of that built. So he lived there for a hot minute until his death, and he is also going to be coming up later, but in a bit of a more minor way than the Boleyns are going to show up. But interestingly enough, one of the last owners that they had was Philip Kerr. He ended up relinquishing ownership to the National Trust in December of 1940 because he ended up passing away, and so according to his will, he wanted for the home to go to the National Trust, and so it did, which led to its use in World War II as officers' quarters. And so it's essentially used by the Royal Air Force Alton, which was like nearby. And so they had the enlisted members staying around the property in some of the other locations, but all of the officers actually got to stay in the hall itself. And they used the estate for practicing some of their drills for different things because it was a massive, massive estate. And so I think they had a lake on the property, and so they were able to practice all kinds of different drills as they were preparing to go to war. And so they actually have now a museum that has been set up at Blickling Hall to honor the Royal Air Force members that stayed there. And so that's kind of a cool thing that you can actually still go see to this day, in addition to the hauntings, if you so felt inclined. Now we can get on to the scariness and the spookiness that is going on, because quite a few of these owners just couldn't let it go. So the first haunting that we're going to talk about is going to be from Sir John Falstaff. He, as well as Sir Henry Hobart, both of them play fairly minor haunting roles, but it is said that Sir Falstaff can sometimes be seen wandering the halls, you know, just walking about, letting people know that he's present and he's still there, perhaps living his glory days from being in Shakespeare's play. Sir Henry Hobart is also said to haunt Blickling Hall. Not so much that you see him actually meandering about like you would with Sir Falstaff. It's more so that in his bedroom since his death, on the anniversary of his death every year, you can hear in his bedroom his moans of agony. So apparently he did not die a painless death, which is a bit sad, but you can still hear him moaning to this day. But the biggest hauntings and most well-known hauntings are for Thomas, Anne, and George Boleyn. And oh man, do they go a little bit nuts with the hauntings out there. So the lip gloss real quick is going to be from Spoiled Lips, which is a UK-based indie brand. I'm also going to be tapping into, for eyeshadow, the Glamoween, which is a collaboration between Spoiled Lips and Sydney Nicole. And I thought since it's witchy, that's somewhat apropos. But this is the interior of the palette. You've got all the pretty colors and then 2 highlighter shades down at the bottom. And so I was thinking of going for a bit of a purple look. And I also have 2 palettes from Certify, which is also a UK-based brand. And the first Affinity palette is this guy with lots of purples and pinks and oranges and yellows. And then the Affinity 2 has lots of greens and blues and some silvers. And so I thought that I would kind of combine all 3 of those palettes for the eye look. And then I am going to throw on top from Ciate London. This is a cream eyeshadow in the shade Cupid. So it's this kind of pinkish purple. So first, let's talk about poor George, because he definitely caught it pretty rough considering that he was not really that bad of a dude. It is said that on the anniversary every year of Anne's death, he will show up, but he doesn't have a good time while he's around. It is said that you can see him being dragged around the countryside as well as on the property. He is headless, as well as the horse that is dragging him is also headless. So that's a super fun time for him. Thanks, Dad. Now it is said that on the anniversary of her death, much like George arriving on the property, she also makes a guest appearance, which is super duper fun for all the tourists that show up there these days. On May 19th every year, that is probably the most popular time for tourists to show up at Blickling Hall, because that is when it is said that in the evening you can see her arrive. And she arrives in somewhat interesting style in a coach that is drawn by 4 headless horses and driven by a headless coachman. She is chilling in the coach as it arrives, and she is holding her own head in her lap during that trip. Now, once the coach arrives on the property, it disappears, but Anne does not. People that visit Blickling Hall during this time have stated she does not leave at the same time as the coach. She will remain on the property and actually wander the halls until sunrise the next day, which is part of why a lot of people like to stay there so that they can attempt to see her as she is meandering the halls in the middle of the night. I was not able to find out if she actually actively engages with any tourists while they're there, but it is said that she is wearing a whitish gray dress and she just carries her head around with her. Sounds like a great night to me. So the final ghost that we're going to talk about is Tom. And oh man, Tom has some real bad luck, because apparently in the afterlife he actually catches it real rough for what he did to his kids. So apparently if you were wanting to catch a glimpse of Thomas Boleyn, you're gonna have a hard time of it, because he's got a whole lot that he has to get done every year on the anniversary of Anne Boleyn's death. And so the likelihood of you catching him is pretty small. So rumor has it that he is actually cursed, and this curse is said to last for the next 1,000 years. So he's gonna be doing this for a hot minute, which I feel like is only fair. So his task every year is that he must ride like a crazy person with his coach, and he must cross 12 bridges. These bridges essentially span from Blickling Hall all the way to Wroxham. I'm not quite sure my pronunciation is correct on that, it's probably not. But he has to hit all 12 of these bridges before sunrise the next day, or as the legend states, before the cocks crow in the morning. So he is driving this carriage like the devil himself is after him, and he essentially has to do this as penance for the next 1,000 years. And if he is not able to do it, then apparently his soul is just going to be lost forever. So that is what he is doing this entire time, which sounds, like a good time, really. Just a lot of horseback riding, coach driving. It's, it's whatever, it's fine. I feel like at the end of the day, much deserved for what he did. He was a bad guy. And I feel like this is one of those instances where I really kind of hope that's true, because that guy was a garbage dude, because he clearly cared more about his own selfish goals within society rather than the safety and well-being of his own kids. And so that means that that guy has to essentially just rot in hell for forever, that's cool by me. I did also find it interesting that even though the hall was used in World War II, I definitely would have expected there to be perhaps a bit more World War II related hauntings. So I thought that was just kind of interesting that there wasn't really a whole lot of anything documenting World War II related hauntings. But yeah, that was all of the hauntings that are going on in Blickling Hall as of right now. And so if you guys ever get the chance to go to Norfolk in England, I would highly recommend checking it out because it seems like there's just a lot of really interesting activity going on, and May 19th would be the day to go if you really want to see a whole bunch of crazy hauntings that are going on. This was my collab. Make sure you guys go check out Ad's video. I'm sure it's going to be real interesting. I picked a super duper interesting hotel in Jerome, Arizona for her to take a look at, and so I think that one's gonna be super duper fun. So make sure you guys go check out that video. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Let me know down in the comments below what you guys thought. If you are interested in hearing about more hauntings and things like that, I would be happy to talk about some more for like the Arizona area. Apparently there's just a whole lot of haunting stuff going on, but I definitely think that Adalind is probably the top choice for going to check out that, because she is way better at storytelling than I am. I kind of feel like I get lost in like what I'm doing and then I just ramble. Whereas she's real good at doing both and multitasking. So I would definitely go check her out if you guys have not yet, and definitely subscribe to her channel. She is probably the next Bailey Sarian as far as I'm concerned. I'm just throwing that out there. It's not murder related, it's just ghosts and stuff, but she does a real good job at it and her makeup is stunning. So go check her out, subscribe. If you made it to the end of this video and you feel so compelled, I would also love it if you would subscribe to me. I really would love to build my family on here. We talk a ton about different indie brands, but this is the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, that this was fun for you guys to kind of sit through and hear about a haunted place, and I loved this collab. If anyone else wants to do a collab with me, I would love to. Just getting to know all of you guys and seeing some of the amazing content that people are putting out there, like that is literally what this is all about. And so I was so happy that I got asked to do this by Adalind, and I hope she had as much fun as I did, and make sure you guys go and check out her video. And other than that, you guys just have a good one.